Okay, Aislinn Clancy, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Uh, why don't we start with a little warm up? How have you been spending your summer vacation? Your
Well,
extended summer vacation.
I know. I mean, it is really nice to be in the riding. There's a lot of events I can't go to, or it's a good opportunity to catch up with a lot of constituents. I also have had three elections in 3 years, so it was good to not have an election to worry about. So yeah, I spent a bit of time with the kids. It was good to be a 5-minute bike ride from my office.
All right, well that sounds positive anyway. Um, to dig into, you know, what's going on in provincial politics, I think one of the things that I've been struggling with, or one of the things I've been observing, is that the premier especially has been like full blown like distraction politics. So speed cameras, you know, I have a feel like this wasn't an issue until Doug Ford decided to make it an issue, and then we hear maybe his daughter has a lead foot, and then we hear cabinet ministers have lead feet, and he's pouring out Crown Royal in front of the press, and he's eating ice cream bars. So the premier is kind of like in full blown like I'm just doing anything to get attention. Meanwhile, problems are festering, but at the same time, and I think you might agree that opposition has been having a hard time breaking through and presenting a viable alternative as well. So that's a lot just before digging into the issues. You and Mike and everybody else who sits on the opposition side of the house has to work on, right?
100%, like I do think that Mike is a very respected voice in terms of holding the government accountable, but for sure NDP, like Liberals are in transition as they find a new leader. NDP are still struggling to kind of poke their nose out further. And the premier kind of gets away with the smoke show, right? Where there's a lot of theater, there's a lot of shenanigans. But then when we look down and we're talking to folks working in the front line, working in healthcare, working in colleges and universities are under attack. It just seems like across the board, our systems are really struggling. It's been 7 years with this Ford government, and the cracks are becoming canyons now. So yeah, it's you want people to notice that part, but I think it is up to us to kind of shed light on how this government underfunds, undermines, not even just underfunds, but undermines our institutions we've grown to love.
Is there some sense, because you did an event with um, Catherine Fife about school safety, not just school safety, but like the crumbling conditions of schools, that there needs to be some sort of like coherent center left coalition. I don't mean coherent in that you have to make sense, but I mean like cooperating and working together. And I think there was some discussion about that in the immediate aftermath of the election. But you have Marat Stiles on like Village Media saying like I have a lot of work to do to, you know, establish myself. Is part of that, speaking from the Green point of view, is part of that, finding ways to work more collaboratively and like this event that you and Catherine Fife did to just point out like a general interest issue, which should be like this neighborhood school is falling apart and it's not alone.
Yeah, like I work really well with Catherine, but I think we need to put pressure on the parties. Like Green Party has never been averse to collaborating. Mike and I constantly co-sponsor bills. I co-sponsored a bill with NDP and Liberals to have our First Persons Day coming up October 18th. My bill, Homelessness Ends with Housing, I co-sponsored with the Liberals, invited the NDP. So we need to put pressure on the NDP, on the Liberals to continue to be collaborative. I think unless there's trust there, and there's a political will to say, don't divide. But I mean, our political system also needs an update. This first past the post really doesn't lend itself to collaboration as much as a proportional representation system. So, Mike and I constantly work across party lines. We build strong relationships with all political parties, and I do think it's essential in order to kind of move forward with kind of a political agenda that I think actually suits the population and what they want and their values.
I wanted to ask you about the Homeless Ends with Housing Act because that's your private member's bill. Um, I think we can all agree that there's still a housing crisis. We don't necessarily hear a lot about it, but Mike was saying this at his town hall the other night. His number one priority for the last few years has been housing, especially supportive housing. And though he did note, he's been successful and the Guelph community's been successful in getting a couple of projects going, over 100 new units of supportive housing, that it's hard. And he said, quite explicitly, my number one priority now is like the new hospital. Not that he's saying he's abandoning housing, but I mean, there is kind of a message out there. It's like we've done everything we can do. Um, and the private sector, is struggling with their own concerns, the economy, supply chains. I guess in terms of where this bill goes next, isn't it facing like just in terms of like setting up a legislation that says like we're going to like legislate like no, we're going to have housing for everyone. We still have to you still have that first barrier, which is like I think people are just kind of sick of talking about it, right?
Well, it's because nothing's happening, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, it's amazing to me that there isn't more pressure on the government to do something about it. Like I read article after article being like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Meanwhile, we know what to do. This is not a new phenomenon of folks facing homelessness. People around the world are doing really great things. And that's what the Homelessness Ends with Housing bill is all about. It's like, okay, let's stop trimming around the edges and punching down on folks who are facing hard times. This is the solution. This does work in other jurisdictions. It will work here. And I just keep reminding people that this government has no plan. So if
Hmm.
you feel like encampments are an issue and homelessness is something that you don't want to keep growing in your community, if you want an answer to homelessness, this is a proposal for the government to do the right thing, come up with a plan, and actually intentionally address the issue. Right now, there is no plan. So, yes, our communities are amazing, our not-for-profit sector, private donors, putting projects forward, donating land, donating churches, adding supportive housing beds, knowing how great the need is. But we need the partner of the province. And so this is really a call to ask for that. And it's echoing the calls of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, right? Their report, 444 municipalities saying this is what we want. So we're really just putting that in the form of legislation and giving the government an opportunity to move forward.
I don't disagree that the government has no plan, but on the other hand, they also don't want to take plans from anyone who isn't in house, right? So I mean that's another barrier in essence is that, they adapt the Ashland sponsored plan. They think that makes them look weak or, it doesn't go down ideologically with I don't know whatever the ideology is. That's that's another tough pole to vault, as it were, for this legislation.
For sure, like, they don't want to feel cornered into something or, and that's not my approach. If you looked at how I've spoken with the minister, I'm like, please look at the bill. We've sat down, we've talked about it, right? Like, we've had really good conversations. I really have deep respect for Minister Flack and his approach of trying to find that balance of like understanding kind of the theater rhetoric side of politics, but also I think he is a genuinely good guy and he wants to address vulnerable people's needs for housing and supports. So, don't get me wrong. If they want to put a blue coat of paint on it and call it theirs, I'm fine with that. Like, there's no monopoly on a good idea. I'm just here to kind of put forward what I know and is going to really address the alarming concern. Last time my bill was called past due, and it was the recommendations on how to stop the hemorrhaging of
Right.
people in affordable housing onto the street. This is my recommendation on how to get folks from the street into housing. And you know what? My commitment is to my community. And so they've asked for this. And so it's up to me to kind of work across party lines. I've got support from parties. I've been really trying to hustle and build support with the government. And so we'll see where it goes.
Kitchener-Waterloo is kind of where a lot of, you know, these approaches to homelessness have kind of been tested too. Like the major court cases that have said, cities can't forcibly remove encampments. That was started in Kitchener. There's still the issue of I think it's on Victoria Road where they want to build a new Metrolink station where there's currently an encampment, and
Yeah.
uh, it just seems like, and I'm not saying this to flatter you, but I mean this is the region where a lot of this stuff has been put to the test in terms of legislation and in terms of government approaches that um, not to cast blame on Waterloo region, but they've been doing it the wrong way. So if that's the wrong way, what is the alternative?
I mean, that said, we've invested like millions of dollars in our plan to end chronic homelessness. So as much as, the region doesn't have somewhere for those folks to go, I mean, the court case said, you can't evict them because where are they going to go, right? But the region has invested a ton of money in expanding shelter beds, in investing in affordable housing. But the region can't go it alone, right? They really need the partner of the province to support. I think we spend somewhere between 55 and 60% on the housing projects that we have, and it's really a provincial mandate. And so
Hmm.
that money comes from the property tax base, whereas it's really these gaping holes in protecting tenants and having these bad actors, and then the lack of supply. That isn't just the PC governments, right? Like we
Right.
know, I think it was Harris and Liberal governments in the past that canned the regular building of affordable housing. So I think it's like 93% of our affordable housing was built before 1995. I always get those two numbers mixed up. But we have a crumbling stock. We haven't added to it significantly. So
Yeah.
here we are. And only municipalities can do so much. But
Right.
yeah, I live close to that encampment. I always call it the most famous encampment in Ontario. And so that's why I walk past it every day. And so I feel compelled every day to do something to address folks who are struggling with mental health. It's not fair to say go get a job. Like
Hmm.
somebody who's struggling with psychosis and these toxic drugs, they're not in a great space for that. We need to house them and support them with recovery. And Toronto's doing like that Dunn Avenue. I don't know if you saw that, the one that the hospital built
Right.
to divert folks from hospital stays. I mean, it's just proven to be financially better on our whole system to house people than have hospital stays, shelter beds, jail beds to be involved in this cycle. And nobody gets better, and it costs us everybody a ton of money. So there is a fiscal argument to be made that I hope the government will see as well.
I forgot Doug Ford told young people to work hard to get a job.
Yeah,
And
well,
in the startling face of the youth unemployment stats, that
I
just
think he only gets, yeah.
youth overall are just not working hard enough to find work.
Yeah, they need to inherit their dad's sticker company, and then they'd be fine.
It's not untrue. I want to talk a bit about the environment because I was reminded the other night that the Green Party did start out as like an environmental
Yeah, yeah.
fight climate change party because I feel like we're in a moment now where the focus where people are looking at environmental causes. And we actually have a climate change summit happening in Guelph as we're recording this next weekend. Um, there's it's kind of fallen off the grid, so to speak, like environmentally. You have, Mark Carney saying we're doing nation building projects, and nation building projects mean, nuclear power plants and pipelines and stuff. Doug
He
Ford is,
didn't say pipelines.
well, pipelines
Yet
adjacent.
so far, I
Well,
can give him a little bit of credit. He
it's
hasn't
it's
expanded pipelines
it's
yet.
coming.
Yeah, I hope not. No.
But it's these
Don't
big
get me wrong. I did.
dirty.
There was very little renewable on there. There was a bit of
There's
wind in the East Coast, but no, I didn't see a lot of storage and solar on the,
right.
the docket or the upgrading of the grid. Yeah,
Right, but I mean, you know what I'm getting at, which is
I
like
do. Yeah.
like the environment is clearly not a priority
Oh,
because
Yeah.
so how do you make it a priority again? And I mean, can you? Because even before, everyone was talking about Donald Trump and tariffs, like it was hard to, the PC government's idea of like environmental protection was like picking up litter, which is like the a rung so low it might as well be underground.
Yeah, I mean, accountability goes a long way. Like there are environmental issues that really resonate with folks. I'm really hoping that we can do some good work around the co total like abandonment of recycling in Ontario. Like it's pretty important to a lot of people that we don't continue to just ship garbage and expand landfills. I know that maybe PC donors make money off of expanding landfills, but I don't think the general public is a fan of litter. So, I do think we could shed a little light on the amount of waste that Ontario produces and how it doesn't help our sovereignty conversation. I
Right.
think Michigan takes 40% of our garbage. I don't think that they're going to do that forever. And so we have a lot of vulnerabilities. We have vulnerabilities in the energy sector. I mean, folks don't really realize that our nuclear project is an American design that uses enriched uranium that we can only buy from the United States. So 100% of this new nuclear is making us dependent on the Americans, which is totally flies in the face of what Doug Ford claims to be about. And I don't think people want more gas plants. It's not good for the quality of air. People already are struggling to breathe. We have asthma rates out the wazoo. So I think it's like, yes, maybe I'm not going to talk about greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions because people start to fade off. But I'm going to talk about issues that matter to them, like clean air and not throwing so much garbage away because I think people can get behind that and they care about fairness and accountability. Like, I don't think people want the future of our energy to be in the hands of Donald Trump. So I
Right.
think we can continue to push the government on these issues and in a way that people are going to appreciate. And I know when I go back to the legislature that Mike and I talk about climate. We talk about it regularly and we weave it into everything we do, whether it's transit or housing. Like this government punches down and gets rid of, like, it's not even that we're staying still, we're getting worse. Like
Right.
we are back to at the emissions where when we shut down coal power because we're just running gas plants 24/7. So, you know, Mike and we talk about climate and people want us to talk about climate. So I really admire, he was the only party leader at AMO to talk about the fact that climate change is real. The world
Mm.
is on fire. We're having these forest fires. So we're going to keep it up. I think people want accountability. There is issues related to climate that they care about that I think go beyond, the usual issues that people care about. So we're going to keep pushing on those issues.
Well, you mentioned recycling. I'm thinking a lot about because I did this on an episode of the podcast, a beer store, the beer stores,
Yeah.
which was like the most successful recycling program like ever, but that is kind of slowly being unwound with all the beer store locations being closed. And then grocery stores are being expected to pick up that slack on January 1st by taking empties. And I work part-time in a grocery store, and I got to tell you, I've heard nothing about taking back empties in
The
2.5 months.
government, yeah, I think it's a game of chicken at this point. I don't know if they're actually, I don't know where they're at with that in terms of compelling. I know I've heard some tough talk, but
Yeah.
this is their audience. Big business is their audience, and they haven't been, I don't think they've had a good process of transitioning, to be honest. So grocery stores have legitimate concerns and criticisms. There's costs associated that governments need to be in communication with them about this. I mean, the beverage companies want deposit return. All the provinces in Canada have this amazing system that the beer store had that's just applied across the board to a Coke can and a beer can. Oh my gosh, they're made of the same materials. Why don't we have a universal system? It creates jobs. It actually does a good job of keeping things out of the landfill, which saves us all a ton of money and it saves our planet thousands of years of garbage that we can avoid. We can just repurpose it. But we need the political will. And I do think I was in a diner and I was listening to a bunch of old gentlemen, white old men talking about how they were so shocked that in this rural community the beer store was gone and now there's nowhere
Right.
to bring your empties. So I think, I don't know if they vote green. They may not be my base, but people care about that. They're alarmed at this. And I don't know. Yeah, sure, everybody wanted beer in the convenience store. Maybe there was enough political support for that. But I think people expected them to follow through on their promise of keeping those other bits of infrastructure. And I went to BC. There's really cool ways they have it. They have shipping containers and QR codes and accounts. You just dump in your bag and go. I mean, every grocery store often has like a couple parking spots right at the back that aren't being used. So
Right.
there is a way forward. We can't act like our hands don't work and that we're just going to break the dishes so we never have to wash the dishes again. Let's move ahead and work together as a team to do what's best.
Yeah. Um, and this is kind of environmental too, but just to get a few words about, what's going on with marine land, which I think is like it's one of those things we don't really talk about until it comes up in the news, and then marine land says like, oh, we can't do anything with our whales, so we have to euthanize them. I think that that's kind of it's been like the final straw. It's like the final indignity of marine land, that's been, it's been all downhill since Blackfish came out. But in terms of what can be done about helping those, it's not just the beluga whales. There's a ton of animals still at marine land. Um, you know, what I guess that's the question. It's like what can be done, and what would you like to see done? Because I know there is a sanctuary that is being built. It's obviously not ready right now. There are they wanted to send them to another marine land style park in China, which the feds put the kibosh on. It just seems like there are a lot of no options, but like in terms of like the potential options, what are those that you're aware of?
I mean, to me, it sounds like a ton of finger pointing,
Yeah,
right? Like, that's not helpful. Sit at a table together, province, feds, marine land, and figure it out. Like, we have a lot of smart people in this country, as if in the whole world there's nowhere to put beluga whales. Like, come on. Like, I honestly only see finger pointing. I don't know if it's because I'm a mom. I'm a little sensitive to people just shirking the blame and say, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to do that. And it's like, no, you can't do this. And they're not talking to each other. It's like, no, come on. Let's sit down at a table together and like all have some shared responsibility about these beautiful creatures. Like I appreciate the fact that they educated and inspired a generation of marine biologists. Like I don't love their living conditions, but there has to be a way that we can work together for the well-being of these beautiful creatures. It disappoints me when I see just people pointing fingers at each other saying, the feds are saying the province has to do more. The province says marine land and the feds have to do more. Marine land says the feds, it's like just sit down together. Like, I appreciate that people can disagree, but nothing, you know what? I will always have a coffee with somebody who disagrees with me. If you want to shout about something, let's sit down, let's have a meal, let's figure out if there's values that we share, that we have some ultimate goal. I think everybody wants to do something about the beluga whales. Nobody
yeah,
wants them to die.
no,
So there's you go. We have a shared path outcome. And so I expect better of people.
for sure. And maybe to wrap up, I know that uh, Mike had a town hall the other night. He had the petition for getting more ghost service on the weekends. I got at least 20 new signatures. That seems to be, the pictures alone that I see posted on social media, like on Sunday, with people lined up at the buses at Bramalea, and like
Mhm.
there's one bus and three busloads of people. Um, in terms of that, like advocacy, what's the status of that? Is there any like releasing of the friction from Metrolinx that maybe we're going to get more buses or heaven forbid a train on the
I
Kitchener
mean,
line?
I do think that I think the advocacy is awesome. I really am so grateful to the community for getting on board. Like we've had over 5,000 emails sent to Metrolinx. I think, they told us, I don't know, 6 months, a year, like we have regular chats with them. Actually, they have pretty good community staff and they're like, if you think there's a new route that we need, show us the demand. So it was kind of like challenge accepted, uh, you know, and people, it's been really exciting. I'm out in the community and people are like, I sent an email. People are feeling disempowered sometimes that all these things are happening in the world. They feel powerless, like they can't be part of the change they want to see. And so I really think that this campaign has really been a catalyst to bring people together, to engage them in the political process. And I'm excited. I'm really optimistic that we'll see improvements to service in the next few months. Yeah, I'm optimistic.
All right. Well, Aislinn Clancy is optimistic. I should point out that this is before the legislature returns, so we may talk in December and say, "May God have mercy on your soul." But for now, Aislinn, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Adam. Have a good day.